In September of last year, I picked up this magazine from a thrift store on a whim, PC Gamer's 2003 June issue, and it was unintentionally a pretty interesting read I felt like cataloging, talking about bits and pieces of things I thought were worth discussing and adding additional insight as I went along. The only reason I'm getting to it 6 months later is because I spent most of last year working on one sole project that ended up not being worth the effort, so instead I'm putting my efforts towards something smaller. Something that strikes me as especially neat about this magazine is the fact that it came out in June of 2003, 6 months before I was born. This stack of papers is going to be 20 sooner than I will. On the cover, Half-Life 2 appears to be the big selling point of this issue, with Alex and Gordon featured prominently on it, as well as the titles to other games. The first 2 pages contain screenshots and promotional art for a game called PlanetSide, which I've heard of but never played. I watched a Mandalore gaming review of a sequel, and judging from what I saw, it looks something akin to Battlefield, but in space. So I'm assuming Battlefield 2142. After flipping through the table of contents to avoid spoilers, we stumble upon this gaudy-looking Alienware ad. I would say it looks over the top, but I'd argue considering the existence of modern high-end PC setups, this looks surprisingly quaint by comparison. Quote, Alienware is on the front line of an aesthetic movement that's sweeping the entire industry. End quote. Yeah, I think it's safe to say these Fisher-Price styled PCs didn't last as long as the marketing department probably thought they would. I could be wrong. Gosh, the desktop computer is priced at a ridiculous $2,600 while the laptop costs an additional $300 more. Shoot, my laptop only cost $350. I guess that's what 16 years of Moore's Law looks like. Keep this in mind for the upcoming pages, it's gonna be a recurring theme. Balls Guarana, or however you pronounce that. I've seen this drink in other print ads and saw that it cropped up in Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, a game set in Texas. Yet as someone who's lived in Texas all his life, I've never seen one of these in person before. After this, there's an article for an upcoming game slated to release in winter of 2003, Call of Duty. You heard that right, not Modern Warfare or Advanced Warfare or Infinite Warfare or even Modern Warfare, just Call of Duty. It was so bizarre finding such an unsuspecting article for this game long preceding its juggernaut popularity. It was like finding a famous person's high school yearbook picture, and even more shocking to find that I recognized every level used for the in-game screen caps. One of them even showed up in one of my previous videos. World War II game ads crop up like weeds in this magazine, so get used to seeing them. As a palate cleanser from them, we're given this cool looking advertisement for Lara Croft Tomb Raider, the Angel of Darkness. To me, there's something very charming about this time frame style of older 3D. Since I've never played games in the same year they were released, I feel as though it's conditioned me to appreciate the artistic merit of older 3D even if the aging of technology is inevitable. Doesn't mean you can't create something that's visually appealing or charming with the limitations of the time. Doesn't mean you can't create something that has sticking power and has things you can appreciate about it regardless of the age. An example I'd point to is the pre-rendered 3D found throughout Planescape Torment. Technologically dated, but the direction shines through beautifully, and the intro manages to capture a great deal of mystery and intrigue. Moving a little further up ahead, we find an article for Far Cry 1. A great game I actually have a physical copy of. I can't show much of it though since the box is literally falling apart, and it's just barely holding together thanks to some tape the previous owner applied to it. I don't know how well it stacks up against the rest of the franchise since I only played it and 2, but Far Cry 1 is a great game for what it is. Unlike the sequel, which went in an open-world direction of sorts, Far Cry 1 is a linear arrangement of sprawling levels so massive that you can confuse the level for a skybox. The levels are just that big, and for opportunity to find unique vantage points and hidden weapons and even vehicles off the beaten path. There's so much to play with, and with the aid of systems like stealth, physics, and enemy AI that actively tries to hunt you down, there are even more layers of replay value added to the game. The game is also just very pretty with very scenic environments and pretty impressive visual effects. While on the topic of this franchise, Far Cry 2 might get a small video in its own right. Maybe not a full review, but like a 10 hours impression of the game, since I feel like that's enough to give a well-formulated discussion about my thoughts on it. If I could give a concentrated perspective on my thoughts pertaining to gameplay, Far Cry 2 has a collection of generally solid mechanics and content, but it's missing something to make the experience feel more whole. Like maybe more variable systems to its gameplay so that clearing every outpost doesn't feel the same. More evolution to the gameplay so that Hour 3 and Hour 10 don't feel the exact same. Or give me something I feel like all of my efforts are tangibly building towards so it doesn't feel like I'm just messing around with no purpose. Another noteworthy advertisement, Republic for Revolution. Its blurbs look neat, but what's especially cool is this art. I'm almost convinced that people putting together this magazine intentionally chose stills such as this to occupy single pages, so that readers can cut it out and use it as a poster, then buy another magazine after forgetting to finish the article printed on the back page. Smart. There seems to be a fair amount of buzz over the Matrix in this magazine, with 2 separate ads. One for the game titled Enter the Matrix, and another for an anthology titled The Animatrix. I haven't consumed any Matrix-related media before, but I'm familiar with one of the creators on board with this project, Peter Chung, creator of the MTV animated series Aeon Flux. That show is often described as being surreal and horrifying, but perhaps the weirdest thing credited to him is the Rugrats pilot. It's very surreal seeing these characters not weighed down by the budgetary or deadline constraints of television production with very fluid and detailed movement, and I imagine it gives someone whiplash to do a side-by-side comparison between this pilot and episodes from the series run. Anywho, random derailment aside, here we have Chrome, a game I've never played but saw the Examined Life of Gaming talk about, one of my favorite channels and a personal inspiration for this channel. His description of it said it was like a fusion between Deus Ex and Far Cry, and I've seen circles that hold this game in the same kind of high regard akin to other Eastern Eurojank gems. In this next page spread, we see a collection of crib notes written about hyped up E3 games, including a sad reminder of what could have been. Full Throttle 2, slated for release in fall of 2003, never came to be. It was a sequel to one of LucasArts' great adventure games and got presumably shelved along with Sam & Max Freelance Police, a game from a franchise I hold near and dear to my heart. The company was moving away from adventure games after their title Grim Fandango was a big financial investment that underperformed. Grim, Full Throttle, and the Sam & Max games are all deserving of your attention and are readily accessible via Steam, not to mention they go on sale for cheap frequently. If you're looking for games with consistently funny and heartfelt writing, I highly recommend them all, but also feel you shouldn't hesitate to use a guide, since these games can have a kind of logic that some might consider obtuse. On the next dual page spread, we have an ad for Battlefield 1942, decorated with quotes and recognitions from various online gaming publications. And I can't say it's unwarranted. I don't know if this conversation still exists or ever existed to begin with, but I have a strong preference for Battlefield 1942 over the original COD. Both are games I love, but the former feels like its gameplay systems are far more dynamic and interesting to play with. There's significantly more replay value and depth to the mechanics, room for experimentation, and just a single map compared to a single mission in the original COD. Yes, I know one is technically a proper campaign and the other is just a series of bot matches haphazardly stitched together. But I don't know, I feel like 1942's campaign manages to be much more satisfying of an experience on the whole. Finally, we reach the main event advertised on the cover of this magazine. Half-Life 2 slated for release September 30th, 2003. Or so they thought. On the 23rd of September, Gabe Newell would announce Half-Life 2 was delayed, expecting a holiday release. But this wouldn't come to pass when later in October the source code would be leaked and eventually recompiled into a playable, albeit unfinished version. The saga of the source code leak itself has a lot of crazy turns, like the hacker Axel Gamby being contacted by Valve as bait to get them to enter the US so he could be detained by the authorities. I'll leave a link to an article discussing the story in detail if I can find it, but the relevant part of the story is that these leaks would stifle development and Half-Life 2 would ultimately end up releasing a little over a year later. These screenshots are neat if a bit rough looking. This Combine soldier for some reason has a blue mask even though one of the pages depicts them with a white mask they'd end up with in the final product. Gee, I wonder what this alien design is inspired by. There's some interesting little comparison screenshots of Half-Life 1 and 2 versions of both the G-Man and Barney, showing how far we've come in a matter of 5 years. That's a lot of progress, especially when many consider the Half-Life 2 iterations of these characters to still hold up to modern scrutiny. Hey, wait a second. Midtown Madness 3 only on Xbox. What's this doing in a PC Gamer magazine? At the very end of the cover story, we're granted the blessing of Tony Hawk's presence in all of his glory and an advertisement for Pro. After that attempted sensory overload that was funnier in my head, we see a review for Delta Force Black Hawk Down, a game most might recognize from Racevic's excellent video on modern military shooters released before Modern Warfare, but is again another case of a game I was introduced to by the Examined Life of Gaming. Charlie don't surf, but the prop wash and other water effects are a nice touch. Even in magazines, COD 4 continues to haunt me. Later into the depths of his magazine, we spy these advertisements for Nvidia featuring iconic characters from well-respected franchises. Master Chief, Boba Fett, and Lara Croft. This last one's just a nameless guy, and he's not a particularly famous nameless guy, but I guess he is pretty iconic in his own right. Master Chief, Boba Fett, Lara Croft, and the protagonist to every World War II game. These are meant to hype up a 2-page spread advertisement for Nvidia, but before we get to that, a review for Postal 2. It genuinely shocked me to find this in here. That's like finding Waldo at a serial killer's convention. Listen, don't you dare let your local congressman get a hold of this game, as if they weren't asking for trouble by just including this. Gary Coleman will gladly sign his autobiography for you, as long as you don't sell it on eBay. But you know, celebrity signatures always go for more when the actor is dead. Anywho, one diversion later and we reached that dual page spread I was talking about. Here we have Nvidia extolling the power of GeForce FX while advertising Tron 2.0, PlanetSide, EverQuest, and Stalker Oblivion Lost, rechristened the Shadow of Chernobyl when it was released proper. I find it a bit peculiar that this is a magazine from 2003 and the game was released 4 years later. Where were you the day the Mayans dropped the bomb? I was playing with Legos. Here we see more printouts for computer hardware priced extremely high. Seriously, thousands of dollars. Now it's probably rotting away in someone's basement. There's a pretty cool looking pre-rendered 3D ad for Radeon's 9800 Pro. They look like characters from Fallout 1 that didn't survive being dipped in those vats of Fanta lime. It's very off-putting seeing these models that look like they're from a 90s game into this early 2000s ad. But I have little experience with both timeframes, so feel free to comment berating my ignorance. From here we mostly have a lot of the same. A catalog of humorously antiquated PC hardware. IBM 120GB hard drive for $109. What a steal, as in I'm the one being stolen from here. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six 3 plays best on Fisher-Price hardware. It's a good game, never got past the second level though. Rainbow Six 3 smooths over a lot of the controls issues of the previous games and adds some niceties, but they ramp up the difficulty hard. I only ever beat the first level after several tries and accepting 2 injuries to 2 of my operatives. The final page on our nostalgic excursion leaves us with Unreal 2 The Awakening. Never played it, but I know it from somewhere.
Damn.
And that concludes this fun, if long overdue romp through this magazine. This was another video whose production was strained through shifting priorities in life and focusing on other non-video projects. If you've noticed any audio differences between this and my previous videos, no you didn't, I know people don't watch this channel. But it's because I finally got a proper microphone. I'm still working out all of the issues with understanding how to properly use it, as well as my now upgraded editing software, so it'll be a bumpy ride. I'm Sneed, and I thank you for watching.